Hello, everyone, and welcome on Friday. It's 1 p.m. Eastern right now, and welcome to Breaking Into Cybersecurity. Thank you for joining us, and we welcome another amazing guest today that has broken into the industry within the past 5 years to share their journey, their individual journey as to what they did, why they got interested in cybersecurity, and maybe impart that on to you so that if you're interested in following a certain path, you could learn from them. You could pick up some tips and tricks along the way. And if you have friends, family that are also interested, feel free to share with them. We are on LinkedIn. So follow myself, Renee. We are also live on YouTube. So subscribe and hit the notification button. That way you can see next time we go live. And then we're also on your favorite podcast medium, so share away. Today, we have Mr. Will. We're going to call him Will Smith.
Sure.
And that conceal his identity a little bit. Sometimes we do that in security for what we call OPSEC, but we have Mr. Will on today. His background is he was in technical operations, nothing related to cybersecurity, and he transitioned his way over. So I saw his quick bit of his story on a post and wanted to reach out and hear more and share this with all of our listeners. So here we have him today. So Will, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hey, yeah, thanks very much for having me on and thank you for making this podcast, giving us a community. So my background was I kind of started out in completely unrelated to even to IT. So when I was growing up, I loved computers, I loved music, but I never studied either because I had this kind of theory or prejudice that sometimes when you study something, it can take the passion away from it. So I never actually studied it, but I used to take things apart. And then as I got older, I learned how operating systems worked, et cetera, et cetera. Always been into computers. So when I started working at this family-run printing company, basically, as operations support manager, it was a lovely office, a small company, maybe less than 50 employees. And that's where I really first started to realize the kind of the base level of people's kind of IT skills, really. Mm-hmm. Because I'd always just consider myself, I'm quite into computers, but not particularly, above anyone else in terms of skills or ability, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that really kind of taught me that actually a lot of people are in a completely different place, when it comes to IT. So probably is the story with quite a lot of people. I ended up being the kind of the de facto IT guy for the office. So every kind of issue, someone would ask me. And like I say, it was a very small office, so that kind of that made sense. Mm-hmm. And then really within that job, there was a lot of Excel spreadsheets and things like that, and I began to do some really basic things, such as recording like a simple macro on Excel, and then looking at the VBA script, making a few tweaks, nothing hefty at all, like hardly any knowledge, and it really streamlined the processes, Mm-hmm. So I spoke to one of the directors, and he was like, yeah, you definitely use this because it removes lots of human error, and it streamlines things and makes them a lot quicker, etc., etc. And so that's what I did for kind of during that job. What then happened though was completely unrelatedly, the company, basically that department got made redundant. Mm-hmm. So that was when I spoke to the managing director of the company, and he said, well, your IT skills are quite good, why not go into that type thing? And I thought that's awesome. That's a really cool thing to possibly do. And basically I then by coincidence went to a track day with a relative of mine and his friend, And I don't know how many listeners are into cars, but we were in a radical R8. It's like you could, us mere mortals can't even drive that car. And the V8 version held the lap record for the Nürburgring at the time. Very fast car, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, we kind of got chatting, and he works in cybersecurity. He's actually now my mentor slash sensei, but sensei doesn't sound as cool, although it translates to one who has gone before. So I think it's quite an accurate kind of statement. But yeah, he very much mentors me. But yes, we got chatting, and he asked me about just a few basic things. Do you know like do you know why we should use HTTPS and not HTTP? Really simple stuff like that.
Mhm.
And why is a 4-digit PIN a really rubbish password, for example? Exactly, right. So I could answer those things, and I thought that's very, 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 very basic knowledge, and yeah, it is. But actually, I mean, he jokes that, well, I know the same as half the people that he works with, type thing, and that was the first time I thought, oh, maybe I can do something with security.
Yeah, well, definitely. I want to touch back on a couple of parts of your story.
Sure.
First, like, let's go way back to the beginning, where you kind of breezed over that you used to take apart computers and play with operating systems. Like, let's talk about that, because that's almost like the original definition of being a hacker. What are some of the things that you did back then, before I'll bring up another question later
Okay.
in your career?
Cool. Yeah. So I took apart lots and lots of things, and yeah, I agree with you. I think possibly a synonym for hacker is a progressive engineer. Although most of the progressive engineering I was doing was not progressive. It was just taking things apart and maybe putting them back together again. So it didn't really matter what it was. But I was also really interested in how things worked. But
Hmm.
regrettably, I took apart our family's Atari ST after we got Windows, and yeah, I think I broke that. But in general, yeah, certainly finding out how things worked, and then kind of when we got Windows 95,
Hmm.
that's when I started being more interested in how things work on a kind of on a more operating system level, on a more kind of software based level rather than just breaking everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's how I started as well. So
Nice.
definitely an interesting path. One of our other listeners, they're also the IT family guru. And so yeah, they're also looking for a role. So several mentioned, thank you for sharing your story. Um, Another person, Randall, mentioned that you're a reverse engineer, because you take things and you figure out how they're working. So definitely agree with you there. Now let's take it a step back. So you had this question from this mentor, the sensei of yours, that made you interested about security. What was one of your biggest challenges getting into cybersecurity from there?
Okay, so do you know what? I was really, really lucky. The biggest thing that I had, I think, that really helped me was the mentor himself, because we were able to have a chat, and because of his experience, he's just landed a CISO role, by the way, a CISO role. So shout outs
Oh,
to him.
nice.
Yeah, um, but because I was able to speak to him and his breadth of experience, he was able to speak to me about the path in.
Hmm.
Now, everyone's path in is completely different, of course. But because I had the basic technical knowledge of literally, I always say to people, look, if you know what the control panel is, you're on the right path. You can start doing kind of tech support tomorrow if you want, and start learning about Active Directory and networking and things like that. So yeah, he informed me about CompTIA, which I think you guys are fans of, and yeah, he said it's vendor agnostic, so you're not tied to Microsoft or Cisco or
Hmm.
whatever. And yeah, I'll stop there because I keep running away, don't I, with things.
No problem, no problem. So, he advised you. What did he advise you on? Like, did you do CompTIA? Did you do Network Plus? Did you do Security Plus? Like, what was the advice that you got, and how did you approach that advice?
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so he gave me lots of advice, and when it came to the qualifications, he recommended CompTIA, but he helped me out with my CV too, just like some ways of writing it correctly, etc., etc. All the usual good stuff, and he advised me that if you're, and this is really good advice because it's totally true. If you are studying for a Network Plus currently, you can apply for kind of first line IT support help desk roles, because if you're studying for that, it shows that you have the skills and knowledge to do that kind of help desk kind of job. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really great. So I was able to basically this is where kind of it crosses over, because my big break happened when the world's kind of aligned, because I got made redundant, right? But do we still but shall I stop there?
No, keep going.
Cool. So during that time was when, like, as I say, I got made redundant, and the managing director of that company was happy to put in kind of a word to the managed service provider we use, and said, look, this guy has made a really good impression on us. Basically, give me a reference. He's made a good impression on us. He's done this, that, and the other. Do you have any roles? And at the time, there weren't any roles, but I put my CV in, and then actually got contacted on LinkedIn not too long after, I think a couple of months after. Went for interview, and yeah, got the job, and then all the while I was studying for my Network Plus.
Absolutely. One of the comments from YouTube is cybersecurity in many ways is a subset of IT skills. And I think a lot of people don't realize how the IT skills that they've gained can be used to pivot into cybersecurity. And I talk about that all the time when it comes to your transferable skills, being able to document your transferable skills, being able to talk to the value of your transferable skills and how you used them previously and how they can be used in cybersecurity. So it sounds like your mentor kind of gave you some of that advice to do on your resume. Now, you said all the good things, but as many of us know, we don't know all the good things. So what were some of the tips that they gave you to help improve your resume?
So yeah, things like making sure that it's not too long, making sure there's not too much white space. A tip I remember him giving me was to when you have kind of a little tagline underneath your name, to write aspiring information security professional, or aspiring whatever you want to be, because it really shows that that's what you want to do, rather than whatever you're currently doing, which might be nothing to do with IT. Yeah, those were definitely things I remember, and also mentioning pieces of technology that you've used and are competent with and understand, and also learning a little bit more about the industry, so that you can use industry specific terms like SaaS, software as a service, etc. And yeah, making sure that they're included in the CV, really, so that you can sell yourself properly, and that you're talking the language of the employer or the hiring manager.
I love that you said that, to sell yourself properly, because essentially your resume, your LinkedIn profile, they're all a marketing tool to help attract employers to your candidate profile and to help show why you have value and the value that you can bring for your future role, not just what you've done in the past. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So thank you for saying that in your own words by saying to sell yourself, because that's really what it is. Let's dive into a little bit. So you got an IT role. Let's talk about that journey and then how you transitioned from that IT role into your first cybersecurity role.
Into becoming a defender of the cyber realm.
Yeah, exactly.
So after completing the Network Plus studying, so a massive thing I did, and I know that you guys have talked about this on one of your episodes before, was I made sure at that IT job that I was utilizing the the half an hour or whatever it was. I think it was half an hour a day that they said we can use towards personal development.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd always, on my timesheet, I'd always put that in for the last half an hour, and I'd do some studying. And then at the time, I was getting the train, so I carried on studying on the train,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes a little bit when I got home, um, depending how late my girlfriend at the time was working. And then, yeah, got the Network Plus, then started studying for the Security Plus.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that in exactly the same way. Obviously, my experience was also helping me at the time because it was really bolstering. It was giving me hands-on experience, and as we all know, there's no substitute for experience. So things were just making more and more sense. And then I guess really the way was my second big break, really, because I got contacted on LinkedIn by a recruiter about
Mm-hmm.
a security analyst role, and I basically said to him, I can't remember what day of the week was what, but it was something like the interview was on Friday and my Security Plus exam was on Thursday. So I was like, I definitely am interested in the interview, but I may or may not have the qualification when I'm there. But yeah, thankfully I did pass. But yeah, that's how that happened. So it was lucky again. I think I did get two big breaks, and a massive part of my mentor's kind of philosophy is, if you have more wood, build a longer table, not a higher wall. If you're climbing a mountain, help your friends up, and that's exactly totally. I couldn't agree more. I'm up for helping anyone I know that wants to get into cybersecurity to help them.
Wow. I mean, two important points there. First of all, I think if you've gotten to the point where you're about ready to test for an exam, I mean, you shouldn't think that you don't have the qualifications, because you've been continuously learning. And as Randall as well mentioned on LinkedIn, that you're never stop learning, continuous improvement. You've been doing that. So like, while you might not have the qualification on paper, it sounds like by that point you could talk to the processes, why it's important, what's the value. So I think as you mentioned with your mindset, people need to have that mindset, is that if they are working towards something, it doesn't make them not qualified. They just might not have had formal experience in doing that. Let me ask you a question. Before you went to that interview, have you been doing any security related tasks in your IT role that you could then talk to in that interview?
Yeah. So I wish I could remember, all of them, but certainly things like we'd get brute force attacks coming in. Well, probably dictionary attacks, but yeah, basically, we'd have attacks detected. We'd have things like DDoS protection. Yeah, like I say, I really wish I could remember more specifically, Chris, but definitely there was there was definitely security related stuff that came up in that job for sure that helped.
Okay, so yeah, another tip for individuals: make sure you remember those when you're having the interview. That way you could talk to them. We have RGB saying, getting the base skills in networking and security and understanding the business and processes and how technology impacts them are some of the key skills that need to be relevant as a security professional. Totally agree with that. If the business isn't there, you don't have a role. So if you can't enable the business, they won't have a need for you. So perfect. So you had that interview. Did you get that role that first time, that first interview, or like did you have multiple of them?
There were multiple interviews. There was certainly at least one telephone interview and at least one in-person interview, and that was interesting because it was kind of almost like a good cop, bad cop kind of setup. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but yeah, it was challenging, and it was one of those things where I just had no idea whether I'd really done very well or not. But later on, when I asked them why I got the job, it was because of the passion. It was because of my
Mhm.
passion for cybersecurity and learning, and I've still got that passion now.
Yeah,
And
I can
watching
see
things
that.
like DEFCON, yeah, watching things like DEFCON talks and stuff, I could just sort of watch them all day. So I definitely
Absolutely.
recommend people start watching those if they don't already.
So it sounds like you had a lucky break. The recruiter reached out to you, you interviewed, and you got the role on the first spot.
Basically, yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's pretty good. So we're about 20 minutes in. Thank you everyone else for joining. Looks like we have some other people. Some of the comments that also came up. A key to convincing the employer that you could do the job, the task, regardless if you have the experience, project, certifications, is that the credentials can be used during the interview to convince the employer. That's correct. And then from Iman, mentoring is very important to sustain and grow the next generations. Wisdom is not taught anywhere but at the elbow. I think he means like putting in the hard work.
Yeah.
And then Alexander is definitely agreeing that mentoring is super important. And yeah, that's why we do this show, to help everyone. Iman also mentioned that cyber is the most diverse area of IT. Definitely. So yeah, let's talk about what do you do to keep up? Like,
Sure.
cybersecurity is ever evolving. There's new technologies every day. I could tell you from 4 years ago that there's 100 new tools, like 10 different new ways to do things. Like, how do you keep up yourself?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, number one, of course, is to embrace the change. And if you've got the passion for the cybersecurity anyway, you're going to embrace that change because you're interested in what's going. Even if you're not a technical person, you're interested in what's going on. Why is it happening? You know, at whatever kind of level of abstraction. Of course, staying up to date with security news has always been important. It depends what role you have, but so I've actually had the real fortune of kind of carving out my own role, really. So the role changed every sort of 3 months, so I've had a little bit of experience here and there and everywhere. So it's been a case of just continuously learning, I guess. And because I'm already in that continuously learning mindset, it's quite, it's not, I wouldn't say easy, but well, it's straightforward. You know, you don't have to be a super smart person to be in cybersecurity. Yeah, Jason says that all the time, and it's so true. And you certainly don't have to be technical. You know, build on whatever skills you've already got. You know, if you've got those quote unquote soft skills, build on them. Learn a little bit of what you need to know on the IT front, and go from that kind of angle. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And one comment along with that from GB again is that continuous learning, a key eye for research and being inquisitive. You can't possibly know everything. You have to continue to evolve and just have a problem-solving mindset. Absolutely. So question, you mentioned that you carved your own role. Let's talk about that. Like, how did you carve your own role?
So when I started at the same time as the person who would become my manager. She was wonderful, and previously there were kind of no security analysts in the company because it was outsourced. So we had the opportunity to begin by basically running our own, say, vulnerability scanning, and kind of, I guess, checking the homework of the outsourcer, and that in itself was really helpful because it was so much. It was it's hands-on experience. It showed you how things worked. It reinforced all the learning from the Network Plus and the Security Plus, and I mean, essentially, what it felt like we were doing. And in fact, one of my colleagues used this analogy. Was it was almost like we were going around picking up rocks, and then all the insects would crawl out, and we go, okay. You gotta, and they're just like kind of notifying the powers that be about which insects are crawling in which direction and what they're doing, and then and then going for the next one, you know. So that was, yeah, like I say, it was actually really fortunate because it gave us the opportunity to have kind of a breadth of knowledge and to experience lots of different areas.
Yeah, definitely. Another comment is we from Steve Tunning. It's not always knowing the right answer; it's knowing where to find it. And yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I think having that ability to research, to go, hey, I don't quite know the answer yet, but let me get back to you, or I have a feeling as to how to address this problem, but let me validate, come back with a proper solution for you. And just being humble that you don't know everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that whole knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know, and being really, and just being transparent and straight up about it. Having some personal integrity.
Absolutely. So you hired at the same time as the person that became your manager.
Yeah.
You did all this rock overturning and everything like that. How did you start carving your role? How did you start doing what you end up doing right now?
Cool. So I guess if you took a snapshot of my responsibility of both, but probably both of our responsibilities, kind of at any 3 months during the first 2 years, it would look pretty different. There'll be overlap, but one moment it will be kind of a bit more vulnerability management. One moment it'll be more to do with user awareness and training, or phishing, what have you. And I guess once we'd been around, the department got got a much bigger budget, and security wanted to be overhauled anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, really fortunate. And to be honest, one thing that really helped me personally and was every time my director sat me down and said, "So what's your 3-year plan? What's your 5-year plan?" I'd tell him, "Look, dude, if I had a 3 or 5-year plan 3 or 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't be here now. Like, I need to kind of just stay open-minded." And that's not necessarily the best advice for everyone, but it certainly works for some people like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's about not just knowing when to say no to pieces of work or your workload, but also knowing when to say no to a role that you don't want particularly get sucked into. For example, there was one time where the offer was there to kind of work in the SOC for a few months, but I don't think it would have been a few months. I think it would have been kind of one of those. And SOC analyst role is awesome. It's not necessarily for me. So that was one thing. Knowing when to say no, and also letting my managers, etc. know. I mean, they've been amazing. They've been so great, all of them, my managers and directors, and head ofs, in letting me grow. And that's really important to be in a company where the culture's right for you. And most of the things that we ended up doing over those kind of couple of years really were security assurance. So then I got moved into a senior position, and that all relates to security assurance, and loads of things. So one part, for example, is and lots of companies call it a different thing, but when you're kind of auditing another company for their security, if you're going to make a business partnership, we do the reverse of that. So when companies are auditing us for our security, all of that experience and all of that knowledge of the systems and the kind of networking in terms of people, the relationships you build with people over that time have just been really invaluable, because I've been able to I know who to go to, I know how to answer it, I know if I hadn't had that experience, it would be a complete minefield, and that's probably partly why I could give so much value to that role.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned, and I don't think you thought about it when you said it, but
Sure.
if you think about like every 3 months, the different things that you did, by the time you completed your 2 years, you built out a full security program because you took one aspect of that security program and you touched on it for 3 months to build up the maturity to a certain level to where it could sustain. And then you focused on another area. So your manager helped, in effect, over that time span, build out an effective security program by tackling each thing a quarter by a quarter and eventually getting there. So like, give yourself credit for helping to build out a security program, because I think I don't know if you would have ever documented that on your resume, but you should, because it sounds like that's what you did. So think about it in that way. So we're getting close to the end of the half hour. Thinking about all your years of experience and everything that you've gone through, for someone following through your advice, what one piece of sage advice would you give them?
So, yeah, I do have a few. So I'm gonna pick one. It's gonna be, so everyone's path is completely unique.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever you are now, recognize the skills you have, whether they're technical, quote unquote soft, whatever, and build on them. Know what you know what you don't know, talk to people in the industry. And I mean, yeah, if you can have a mentor, then have a mentor. But if your mentor is Chris's podcast, then that's also awesome, you know, because this is what we need. We need mentors for everyone. Like you say, I was just incredibly lucky, and I'm so grateful for that. But my God, I wish everyone could have this. I wish this for everyone, you know.
Absolutely. I think what you summed up is self-awareness, to be able to do a gap assessment on yourself, look at what your strengths, your weaknesses are, and then be able to see where those weaknesses are, figure out if a role really does play to your strengths or does it play to your weaknesses. And if it does, like that SOC analyst role for you, it might not make sense, and you don't want to go through that turmoil of doing a role that doesn't really align to your strengths or your interest, your passion. So
Definitely.
thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your advice. Truly appreciate it. We had lots of great comments. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Click the notification button. That way you could get notified next time we come live, as well as subscribe on all your favorite podcast mediums, and share with your friends and family so those that are interested can learn from us as well. Thank you, everyone.